Batman is a god. When I say this, I'm not talking about it from the perspective of some loser online who likes to rank every comic book character's strengths and abilities. I'm saying this as somebody who loves the medium of comics and realizes that Batman is a character that's greater than life. If you think about the early years of Batman's career, it's very obvious he was flesh and bone. In Batman Year One, you see Batman falling onto cars, getting his flesh torn and his bones broken. In Batman the Cult, you see Batman stripped down to nothing but the ego. His mind is weak and his body is frail. In Batman Knightfall, we see Batman lose his stamina over time, finally succumbing to the mental and physical exhaustion, only then to be broken by Bane. These are only 3 examples, but there are plenty of other examples of Batman comics, especially from the 80s, that highlight Batman as a character who is innately human. But if you jump forward to modern times and look at something like the Batman Arkham games, you see a Batman who spends every waking second beating criminals to a pulp, taking on hundreds of enemies in one night, and enduring some of the most twisted psychological torture anyone can imagine. If you look at modern comics like Chip Zdarsky's Batman run, you see Batman falling out of the sky from space and somehow surviving. All the while, he's dishing punches to a robot that's made of the world's strongest metal. And then you look at Justice League comics and you see Batman standing toe-to-toe with the Justice League's greatest foes, like Darkseid. This does not feel like the same Batman from Batman Year One, the Batman who broke his bones after a 5-foot drop. But what happened? When did the seemingly mortal Batman disappear, and when did this new unbeatable Batman with prep time walk into the mix? It's hard to pinpoint exactly where this started, but I would argue that Grant Morrison's JLA helped signal a major shift in the way the public views Batman as a character. It's important to note that when Grant Morrison broke into the comic scene, a lot of authors were taking comics more seriously and using the medium to deconstruct heroes. A lot of books were stripping away a lot of the fantastical elements that we're familiar with in the comic book medium, instead interrogating what it means to be a superhero. And a lot of these books made our heroes feel more grounded by adding a sense of realism into the stories. There's a lot of iconic stories in the 80s that show this happening. For example, Alan Moore's work on Watchmen and Miracle Man, Frank Miller's work on Daredevil, Neil Gaiman's work on Sandman, and even the Batman stories I mentioned earlier like Batman the Cult and Batman Knightfall all share a common thread. And that thread is that these are all comic books that were oriented more for adults. All of these stories aimed to change the medium and wanted to tell deep, introspective, and socially relevant stories. And then you have Grant Morrison's JLA. In Morrison's Justice League, every member of the League is a god in their own right. But the reason they're gods isn't because of their superhuman abilities. No, the reason they're gods is because of what they represent. To both citizens of the DC universe and readers alike, the JLA is a powerful, aspirational force that acts with kindness, compassion, and equity. They don't judge, they save. And their acts of justice are universal. The bat symbol on Batman's chest, the S on Superman's chest, and the W on Wonder Woman's chest means something to people. Morrison's JLA mythologizes the Justice League and makes them a foundational part of the DC cultural zeitgeist. It doesn't deconstruct them and find ways to ground them in the fabric of reality like a lot of other comic book stories. Instead, it lets these heroes exist as fantastical beings who inspire hope, beings that people look up to, beings that people worship, just like gods. But on top of that, gods can die. And so can members of the Justice League. But even after death, gods are worshipped. And even after death, our favorite members of the Justice League will still be loved by fans. Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman have all died in comic books, and after their death, fans still worship them. And it was with this reinvention of the Justice League that Morrison was able to break the mold of postmodern deconstruction that seemed to define the comic book landscape. I believe this series from the 90s played a huge role in reconfiguring what it means to be Batman, pushing Batman forward and transforming him into something more than flesh and bone, by turning him into a hero who stands toe-to-toe with celestial threats. Now, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of Batman stories from the 2000s that are still grounded, but there are also some fantastical stories as well. Stories in which Batman's feats are unbelievable. We've seen Batman wield Green Lantern rings, we've seen Batman fight aliens, we've seen Batman sit on the Mobius chair. Batman does things that are downright godlike. But just like with scripture and how different religious figures interpret verses differently, different comic book authors interpret Batman's abilities differently. reality. And as fans, we hardly question it, because to us, Batman is a god. But Batman's not a god because he's superhuman. Batman is a god because he's able to live in our hearts and minds. He's a god because he's a figure that we look up to. His symbol is worshipped by the masses, and that's what makes him one of DC's most important heroes. I love Batman, and if you made it this far, you probably love Batman too. So make sure to check out the channel sponsor Organic Price Books, where you can get all your Batman comic book needs like omnibus editions, hardcovers, and trades. And make sure to use code YooHoo on checkout for extra discounts. As always, hope you all enjoyed. Thanks for watching.